Imagine this. A black rancher agrees to marry a stranger for a cow. Yes, you heard that right. A fat stranger with no promises of love, just a deal. But it gets crazier. On their wedding night, she locks herself in the room and refuses to speak to him. What happens next will completely blow your mind. You won't believe the shocking twist that follows. If you're part of the Black Visionaries family, hit that like button right now and subscribe for more jaw-dropping stories like this one. On a quiet, sun-drenched ranch in Texas, Marcus Johnson had always been a man of few words. He was a rancher by trade, a proud black man in a town where everyone knew everyone, but few people truly understood him. For years, Marcus had built his life around the land, his cattle, his crops, and his dreams. But there was one thing that had been missing: a wife. His family had been in the cattle business for generations, and the ranch was everything to him. But times were tough. His cows weren't producing the way they used to, and the ranch was slowly slipping away. He needed a miracle, a way to bring in new cattle, to keep the legacy of his family alive. One afternoon, a strange proposal came his way, one that seemed like something out of a wild Western tale. A woman named Emily came to his ranch, a stranger from a nearby town. She wasn't like the other women Marcus had met. She wasn't looking for romance. No, Emily had a different proposition. "I'll marry you," she said bluntly, walking up to Marcus as he tended to his cattle. He stopped what he was doing, puzzled by her sudden arrival and even more baffled by her words. "Excuse me," Marcus asked, unable to hide his confusion. "I'll marry you," she repeated, "if you agree to sell me your prize cow, Daisy. I'm willing to give you whatever you want in return for her." Marcus blinked. This was strange. He had heard of people doing deals for livestock, but this was something entirely new. Emily was beautiful, yes, but she had a fire in her eyes that made it clear she wasn't just some romantic dreamer. Daisy was the prize of his herd. A cow with an incredible bloodline, one that could provide more than enough calves to rebuild his stock. It was the perfect business deal, but there was a catch. Emily wasn't offering money. She was offering herself. "I'll marry you for Daisy," she said, her voice steady and unwavering. Marcus hesitated. The offer was absurd, but as a rancher, he understood value. Daisy could make him rich again, and Emily seemed like someone who understood the cattle business, maybe even better than some ranchers he knew. But marrying a stranger? That was a different story. Still, desperation crept in. His ranch was on the line, and so, reluctantly, Marcus agreed. The wedding was a small, quiet affair. It wasn't the big celebration Marcus had once imagined, surrounded by family and friends. Instead, it was a simple ceremony, just Marcus and Emily, with a few witnesses from the local town who came for the spectacle. Emily had agreed to the marriage on her terms. She would marriage on her terms. She would marry him, but only if he gave her Daisy immediately after the ceremony. There was no big party afterward, no honeymoon. It was all business. For Marcus, it felt like a transaction, a trade. The ring, the vows, the kiss, it all felt like a formality. The real exchange would happen after they said, "I do." As Emily stepped up the aisle, Marcus couldn't help but notice how different she was from the women in the town. There was no dreamy look in her eyes. There was no excitement about the wedding. She was here for business, and it was clear she wasn't pretending otherwise. "Are you sure about this?" One of the witnesses whispered to Marcus as Emily stood beside him. "You're marrying a stranger for a cow." Marcus nodded, his eyes focused on Emily. "It's more than that. It's about keeping my ranch alive." After the ceremony, as the last of the guests left, Marcus led Emily to the barn where Daisy was kept. He handed over the prized cow. Emily, in turn, handed him a small envelope. "Here's my part of the deal," she said, before turning to leave. "I'll be in the house tonight." Marcus was left standing there, holding the envelope, his mind racing. He wasn't sure whether to feel relief or regret. The deal was done, Daisy was gone, but what would the future with Emily hold? He had no idea. But he needed this. The ranch needed this. That night, Marcus retired to his bedroom, uncertain of what to expect. Emily had already settled into her side of the house, and Marcus could hear her moving around, probably unpacking or organizing her things. There was an eerie silence that settled over the house, the kind of silence that made the house feel more like a strange, unfamiliar place rather than a home. He sat at the kitchen table, staring at the envelope she had handed him earlier. Inside, there was a signed contract confirming the deal, but then, at the very bottom, a note. "Don't worry about anything tonight. I'm locked in my room." Marcus frowned, confused by her words. What did she mean? She had already given him the cow, and now this cryptic note. He stood up and walked toward the bedroom, his thoughts racing. As he approached the door, he noticed that it was locked. Emily had locked the door from the inside. "Emily," he called, his voice echoing through the silence of the house. "What's going on?" There was no response, just the soft sound of movement behind the door. Marcus tried again, knocking lightly. Still nothing. This wasn't what he had expected. The woman he had just married, a stranger, a business partner, had locked herself away on their wedding night. He stood there, uncertain of what to do. Should he try to force the door open? Should he give her space? But why would she lock herself in on the night they were supposed to begin their life together? For a moment, Marcus felt a rush of frustration. He had married her for a cow, and now she was treating him like a stranger. The whole situation was surreal. A stranger in his house, and she locked herself away on the night of their wedding. He didn't understand it. The days that followed were strange. Emily barely spoke to Marcus. She kept to herself, working on the ranch, tending to Daisy and the other animals. Marcus tried to approach her several times, but she was always distant. The more he tried to understand her, the more she seemed like an enigma. She was methodical, calculating. Her knowledge of ranching was impressive, far beyond anything Marcus had expected. She knew how to handle cattle, repair fences, and even improve the land. Marcus had to admit she was good at what she did, but she still hadn't opened up to him. Then one evening, after a long day of work, Emily finally spoke. She found Marcus sitting alone in the barn, staring at the sunset. "I married you for Daisy," she said, her voice quiet but firm. Marcus turned to look at her. "I know. You made that clear. Daisy was my key to getting into the cattle business," she continued, stepping closer. "But it's not just about the cow. I needed someone who knew the land, who understood the business. I knew that would be you." Marcus was silent for a moment, taking in her words. It was then that he understood. Emily hadn't married him for love. She had married him for access to the land, for the resources, for a way into his world. But something about the way she said it made him realize that this was a partnership, not a typical marriage. They both had something to offer each other, but it wasn't love. It was business. And somehow, they were both okay with that. As the weeks passed, Marcus and Emily continued to work together on the ranch. The awkwardness began to fade. They still didn't speak much about their feelings. There were no grand gestures of love, no romantic dinners. But there was an understanding between them. They worked side by side, with mutual respect for each other's skills. And in the end, that was enough. Marcus had saved his ranch, and Emily had found her way into the cattle business. Their marriage, strange as it was, became something more than just a transaction. It was a partnership. Neither of them had expected that, but in the end, it worked. As for the locked door on their wedding night, Marcus eventually stopped knocking. It was just a part of their strange, unconventional life. And maybe that was exactly what made it work. If you're part of the Black Visionaries family, smash that like button right now and hit subscribe because you won't want to miss more jaw-dropping stories just like this one. We've got more incredible stories coming your way that will leave you speechless. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.